When the seventh night came, Scheherazade turned to her sister and said, "O my sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your stories that will last till dawn." Scheherazade smiled and bowed before the king. "With your permission, my king, I will tell a tale tonight. Listen now to a story of fate and hidden secrets. It is the story of a poor porter and 3 mysterious ladies of Baghdad. In the great city of Baghdad, where the Tigris River winds like a silver serpent through ancient streets, there lived a humble porter. Every morning he rose before dawn, while the stars still sparkled in the dark sky. He washed his hands and face with cold water from the well. He knelt on his worn prayer mat, facing Mecca, and whispered his prayers to Allah. Then he shouldered his heavy rope and wooden staff, and walked through the empty streets to the bustling market. There he stood among the other laborers, merchants, and traders who filled the square with their voices. He carried baskets heavy with grain and oil. He lifted bundles of silk and cotton. He bore clay jars filled with honey and dates, all for those who would pay him a single copper coin. His back was bent from years of heavy loads. His hands were rough and calloused. His clothes were patched and faded. Yet his heart remained hopeful, for he trusted that Allah would provide. One morning, as the golden sun rose above the flat rooftops and minarets of Baghdad, casting long shadows across the dusty market square, a beautiful young woman passed through the crowd. She moved like a gazelle, graceful and swift. Her face was veiled with the finest silk, but her eyes shone like stars reflected in still water. Her dress was of deep blue, embroidered with silver threads. Jeweled bracelets clinked softly on her wrists. She carried a large wicker basket in her delicate hand. She approached the porter with the confident step of nobility. "Lift this basket and follow me," she commanded, her voice like music. The porter bent low, lifted the basket onto his strong shoulders, and followed her through the winding streets of Baghdad. They passed through narrow alleys where merchants hawked their wares. They walked by fountains where children played and laughed. They crossed bridges over canals where boats loaded with goods drifted slowly by. Their first stop was a shop where an old man with a white beard sold the sweetest fruits in all the city. She bought crimson apples from distant orchards. She selected pomegranates heavy with ruby seeds. She chose clusters of purple grapes that hung like jewels. She added golden oranges that filled the air with their perfume. She placed them all carefully in the basket. "Carry them," she said with a smile. And he obeyed without question. Next, she led him to a wine merchant's stall, where bottles and jars gleamed like colored glass in the sunlight. She bought wine aged in oak barrels, dark and rich. She purchased rose water distilled from the petals of 1,000 flowers. She selected amber-colored honey wine that sparkled in crystal bottles. The merchant bowed deeply as she paid with gold coins. Again the porter carried the precious goods. At the third shop, run by a fat merchant who grinned with gold teeth, she bought rare delicacies that made the porter's mouth water. There were dried fish caught in the Persian Gulf and salted to perfection. There were soft cheeses wrapped in grape leaves. There were honey cakes dusted with pistachios and almonds. There were roasted meats seasoned with saffron and cinnamon. There were dates stuffed with walnuts and cream. The basket grew heavier with each purchase, but the porter bore it all with patience, dreaming of the feast these foods would make. At the fourth shop, she bought perfumed candles and bars of fine soap. At the fifth, silk scarves and embroidered cushions. At the sixth, musical instruments, a silver flute, and golden bells. The porter's shoulders ached, but he marveled at the woman's wealth. Who is this lady, he wondered, who buys such treasures as if they were common bread? At last, As the sun climbed toward its peak, she led him to a grand house that stood apart from the others. It was 3 stories tall, built of white stone that gleamed in the sunlight. Its door was carved with intricate patterns of gold and ebony, showing peacocks, roses, and flowing vines. Windows were latticed with wood so fine it looked like lace. A garden wall surrounded the house, and through the iron gate, the porter glimpsed orange trees heavy with fruit. The woman knocked 3 times upon the great door. It opened silently, as if moved by invisible hands. 2 other young women appeared in the doorway. The first had hair like spun gold and eyes green as emeralds. The second had raven black hair and skin pale as moonlight. Each was more beautiful than the last, like princesses from a fairy tale. They welcomed their sister warmly, kissing her cheeks and embracing her with joy. They helped her with the many purchases, exclaiming over each treasure, "Sister, you have bought enough food for a feast. And such fine wine, it must have cost a fortune. These fruits are perfect, sweet and ripe." The porter lowered the heavy basket with a grateful groan. He stretched his aching back and rolled his stiff shoulders. He looked around in wonder, for the house was like a palace from the tales of old. The entrance hall was vast and cool. Marble columns supported a ceiling painted with scenes of gardens and flowing rivers. Fountains bubbled in corners, their water dancing in the light. The air was sweet with the scent of jasmine and rose. The 3 ladies whispered together in voices like silver bells. Their words were too soft for the porter to hear, but he saw them glancing at him with curious eyes. Then the first, she who had hired him, turned and said, "You have carried our burdens faithfully through the heat of the morning. Tell us, good porter, what is your wage for such hard work?" He answered shyly, twisting his worn cap in his hands, "My wage is whatever you see fit to give, noble ladies. I ask only for what is just." The second lady, she of the golden hair, smiled kindly and said, "You have worked hard and complained not once, though our baskets were heavy. But what if we gave you not mere coins, but something far more precious? What if we offered you a place at our table tonight? You may share our food and our wine, and enjoy our company until dawn." The porter's eyes widened like a man who had seen a miracle. His heart leaped in his chest. "Is it true? Do you truly invite a humble porter like me to dine in your palace?" The third lady, she of the raven hair, laughed like water over stones. "Yes, we do. But there is one condition, and you must swear to obey it. Ask no questions about what you see here tonight. Speak no curious words about our ways or our customs. If you obey this rule, you may eat the finest foods, drink the sweetest wines, and enjoy our company. But if you speak foolishly or pry into our secrets, you may lose your head before the sun rises." The porter trembled like a leaf in the wind. The thought of losing his life frightened him. But the promise of wine, fine food, and the company of 3 beautiful women overcame his fear. Never in his life had he been invited to such a feast. He bowed low until his forehead nearly touched the marble floor. "I swear by Allah and by the Prophet, peace be upon him, I will obey your condition. I will ask no questions and speak no foolish words. I will be as silent as the grave regarding your secrets."